and let me welcome you to an event that we're calling our Peacekeeping Alumni Event. This event is one of a series of colloquia and panel discussions that we've done that grew out of a project that was under the aegis of the Partnership for Effective Peacekeeping, affectionately known as the PEP, supported principally by three major organizations that are represented here: Refugees International, the Better World Campaign, which is a project of the UN Foundation, and My Own Citizens for Global Solutions. And the upshot of that project was a report, and I hope all of you have, or if not, will get today a copy. It's entitled U.S. Engagement in International Peacekeeping, from Aspiration to Implementation. We also received support of the Compton Foundation in this project, and I want to acknowledge their generous support in this. We're here today, I think of it, to celebrate, to educate, and to advocate, after all, we're in Washington, D.C., about the international peacekeeping and the role for the United States in international peacekeeping. International peacekeeping, in my mind, builds on the belief that, or a value, if you will, that violence is not the proper way to resolve political disputes. Okay? And in thinking that, in embracing that value, I think we're all mindful of the horrors of war. I think we respect the service of our service personnel and our diplomats around the world. We should remember that the founders of the United Nations even cited in the UN Charter, their goal, their principal goal was to save future generations from the scourge of war. This is an ambitious goal, but one that humanity has struggled literally for centuries to grapple with. In 1998, UN peacekeepers received the Nobel Peace Prize, and at that time, then Secretary General of the UN, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, accepted the award on their behalf, and in doing so he said, "Never before in history have military forces been employed internationally not to wage war, not to establish domination, and not to serve the interests of any power or group of powers, but rather to prevent conflict between peoples." And we've learned a lot about international peacekeeping since the 1980s. We've learned of the importance of training and equipping, of developing appropriate doctrine, of the civilian and police capacity that's an essential adjunct to any sort of peacekeeping operation. Many smart, dedicated, talented people all over the world are working very hard to make peacekeeping work. And we're blessed really today to have three of those Americans who've served in international peacekeeping operations with us. We know the perils of diplomacy. We were reminded last week, and we still mourn the deaths of 4 in an American diplomatic mission in Libya. But we also know that idealism and persistence are not futile. And we were reminded of that just yesterday as Aung San Suu Kyi received the Congressional Medal that she'd been awarded in absentia by the Congress. American participation in international peacekeeping is effective, and because we're in Washington, D.C., I guess I'll add even cost-effective, and I recognize that's an important consideration. But I also want to urge upon you the fact that I believe American participation in international peacekeeping is also the right thing to do. And I think that's not a minor consideration. It may not be enough. It may not matter in a budget hearing, but at some level we know it's the right thing to do. And when I say that, I mean that it's consistent with American values. You know, this is a nonpartisan gathering, and we hear a lot in the news today, perhaps because it's a political season, about American exceptionalism. I think that the United States is clearly bound together by a set of shared ideals. That's what makes America exceptional. I think all Americans think that America is exceptional, and it may be true that we differ on which ideals we would emphasize in describing that exceptionalism. And that's fine. It may be the challenge of each generation of Americans to work to understand what are the values that define that generation's sense of America's exceptionalism. I was reading the other day about President Wilson, and was touched in a radio address he gave in 1923, just before he died. It was the 5th anniversary of the end of World War I, then called Armistice Day, how quaint that is now. But he was saying about how, he said, America should resolve, and I'll quote here, to put self-interest away and once more formulate and act upon the highest ideals and purposes of international policy. Thus, and only thus, can we return to the true traditions of America. So I would urge that the impulse that leads the United States and our peacekeepers to participate in international peacekeeping is something that is a thread of American values that goes back really centuries. And I hope that when you leave today, the stories that you've heard and the information that you've gathered will help you understand the importance not only of international peacekeeping and its essential nature in international diplomacy, but also the importance of Americans' active participation in international peacekeeping. And that's the purpose of bringing us all here together today. Let me quickly introduce our speakers, but we have passed out their biographies. If you don't have that, please ask for it. I don't want to belabor it. I want to get to the opportunity to have them talk, and also to let you ask questions. Part of this format is to give them each 15 minutes to speak, and then we'll open this up to question and answer from the audience. And a couple of additional things. We're also in the effort to organize, in connection with this meeting, a network of U.S. peacekeeping alumni. So you may have given your contact information if you're a U.S. peacekeeper to some of the people involved with organizing this event. If you haven't done that yet, let me encourage you to do that after the conclusion of this. Deborah and Lynn and Bill and others are going to be working to set up a group, you know, a listserv, a web page, a Twitter account, all the sorts of accoutrements of social media, but one way or another so that people can keep in touch with each other. Let me also thank my colleagues, Julia Bunting and my former colleague Amanda Bowen, who really have been the moving force in putting this together, and ask for a round of applause for them. They've actually the ladies down there deserve to take a seat. And now let me quickly introduce, going down the podium here, Lynn Holland, to my immediate right, is, I think it's fair to say, a Texan. She, not that long ago, received a master's degree from Texas A&M, and there was a Bush Fellow. She served as a peacekeeper prominently in her career in Haiti and Kosovo, and comes from a background of policing and corrections work. Thank you very much for being with us. Bill Stuebner is someone who's from Ohio. I think it's interesting to see the variety of Americans we bring to the international stage. He served in a professional career for 20 years in the U.S. Army and has participated in 8 different conflicts, he tells me, 3 as a combatant and 5 as a peacekeeper. Among the most prominent of those, Bosnia and also El Salvador when he was in the U.S. Army. And finally, Deborah Owens, who's, I think it's fair to say, a North Carolinian. She has a degree from Chapel Hill and served as a peacekeeper in Somalia, Rwanda, and Bosnia. So with that quick introduction, let's give each their moment to talk, and then I'll open it up and invite you all to participate. Thanks so much for being here.
I've entitled what I'm going to talk about, why Americans and America should be involved in peacekeeping. It is such a privilege and an honor for me to be in this room full of people that want to listen about peacekeeping. I had the privilege of being selected as the first woman executive to serve in a peacekeeping commission as a police officer, and the first people that I talked to thought I lost my mind, and no one wanted to hear about it. So it's really exciting for me. This report that has been done is really well done and thoughtful, and I appreciate it having very factual information in it. And I couldn't resist from aspiration to implementation. That's my career in peacekeeping. And how blessed I am to be able to use those words. They're probably going to steal them from me. Because my aspiration, let me tell you real briefly, for the young people that are here, how do you get into peacekeeping mission? Well, how I got into peacekeeping work was Ray Kelly, who's currently the commissioner of New York City, was in Cité Soleil in Haiti. And there was a woman there, and she was crying. This was on NBC Nightly News, and she had been beaten. And Ray Kelly said, see this woman? I can't do anything for her because the laws here in Haiti say that a domestic violence victim must have a witness to the crime. And so we need American police officers to come here and help me start the new police. And he said, I'm looking for American police instructors to come for 2 weeks. And I'll never forget that. I got out of my chair and I went, I gotta go help that woman. I gotta go help her. And I was gonna go for 2 weeks. And the next thing I knew, I was being whisked off to Washington, D.C. and brought in and told that I was selected to be the first woman to ever serve a peacekeeping mission. And I remember going, you're kidding me. I really thought that they would have had women in there sooner. And so that's, and then 6 months into my mission in Haiti, I had planned on going back to my local law enforcement agency in Texas after I served my time in Haiti. But 6 months into it, I'll never forget the day it happened. I knew that as I was helping shape a nation and their law enforcement, that I couldn't go back into a patrol car and write a ticket. So I call what I'm doing in peacekeeping a calling. It's not just a job. And then the implementation part, that's been the ride. The first mission that I got to participate in was in Haiti. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about 2 sections of the report. And the first part that I'm going to speak about is standing civilian and police capacity. But I'm going to focus on police capacity. And then I'm also going to speak about the obvious, women in peacekeeping. And in the police capacity, I've had the opportunity of influencing what happened in Haiti, Bosnia, Kosovo, and Liberia. And each one of these missions has been very, very different. And I think it's very important that we always realize that one design doesn't fit all. And that we need to make sure that what criminal justice system that we're implementing is tailored for that particular place. I'll never forget I was in Kosovo, and this was after the war, and a policymaker from DC came down and he said, we're going to implement the Haiti plan. And I said, did anyone ever think that Haiti's emerging democracy and Kosovo is maybe not in the same category? And no, we're going to use this plan. And I think, I'd like to encourage people that if you're involved in the policy making, is yes, you can use this as a guide, but you need to really tailor it for that particular country and the mission that needs to be accomplished. I remember that another aspect that I think is important is not just the design, but that you be comprehensive, that you use all the elements in criminal justice system, not just police. When I was in Haiti, we had to train 5,000 in 1 year. And you know what happens when you do that? You fill up the jails. And because the police are so well trained that they do their job and they arrest everybody. And then you don't have any corrections people and you don't have any judges. So as we have been going on this journey in America, we're participating in peacekeeping, we are starting to get smarter, but we still haven't implemented deploying police and criminal justice professionals all at the same time. And I think that's just crucial. We can't have them come in segments. It's all part of one system. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that creating a police department or criminal justice system is not just about training to shoot a gun. It is about training mindset. And the best way that I can teach you, that I can say anything about mindset is how would you embrace if someone came to you one day and said, you now are going to be a communist person, and that's a doctrine that you're going to accept. How long would it take you to embrace it? And so many times people say to me, well, you know, it's very frustrating because they're not getting the democratic principles. Well, if you think about it the way I've just presented it, it takes a while. And some people may never get it, and some people may get it very fast. And the other thing that I want to talk about is some specifics of why I think America needs to be involved in police capacity. I remember when I first arrived in Haiti, and I was so impressed by the young people that were applying. And I'd ask them, why are you applying to be a police officer? And they'd say, because I want to make a difference in my country. And I would say, do you know the risks that are involved? Yes, I do. And many of them knew that the former military police weren't happy that they were going to be there, and that I had actual young people say, I may be assassinated. You know, that takes a lot of courage, and that's got to inspire you. And as an American police officer, you know about adversity, and you're taught about democratic principles, and it's so very, very important that you could convey that to a young person that has the courage to apply for a police department knowing that they may be a victim of actual assault, not from a criminal, but from somebody that's mad that they took their job. The other thing is that when I was in Haiti, the thing that inspired me so much was the young people wanted to learn so desperately. And how desperately did they want to learn? They would sit under the street lights and study in the police academy. Now, you know, in America, I've been through 3 police academies, and not everyone wants to be studying. These young people, I had to make them go to bed because they were that thirsty for knowledge. So it's very, very important that we as American police trainers, that we use our talent to be able to influence and to be able to train the new police. The last thing I want to talk to you about Haiti and the capacity is I had a young man one day, and I'll never forget this the rest of my life. And I said, why are you going to become a police officer? And he took his shirt off, and he showed me where he had been beaten and scars from the former fight. And he said, I don't want my son to ever go through that. Now, if that doesn't inspire you to want to go out there and make a difference, I don't know what will, but that kept me going. And the last point that I'll make is Mark Elias is the chief of police in North Miami, Florida. And Mark Elias was in Haiti. And he says, he just was with me at a conference, and he said to his city manager, I would never be a police chief if I hadn't had the opportunity to serve in Haiti and make a difference. It changed my life. So you see, Americans can give, and it can give back to America, so it's very important. I want to talk about Kosovo very briefly. Kosovo was an extremely complicated mission. And I was deployed before Milosevic was taken out of power. And I had the privilege of seeing what it was like to live in a society that we were, before peacekeeping. And I am grateful, but it was difficult to live in that. And I had to experience a police department that did not embrace democratic principles. I had to live with people who were constantly worried about the perpetrator being the state, not the criminal. The criminal activity in Kosovo when I was there before the war was not a big problem. It was the state. And so it was very interesting for me to go on that. And so after the war, we were able to create the new police, and we had to combine all the different ethnicities. The last country I'll talk about is Liberia. Liberians were happy to see us. That was wonderful. And they said they wanted to not be in civil war anymore. So their police department was excited about embracing us. I'm running out of time, so I want to make sure that I finish with women in peacekeeping. It is very, very important that we understand that women are very effective in peacekeeping and very, very necessary. Whenever I was selected as the first woman, I was very surprised that people asked me how effective I could be, because I thought that it just that if I just went and did it, it'd be okay. And because I believe that it is more about how the woman conducts herself rather than how the men will receive her. And I was subsequently in other missions, I was able to mentor all types of men at very executive levels, and it never was an issue. So I think it's very important that women are involved in peacekeeping missions. And I have one story I want to tell. I was a hostage negotiator, so I was selected to negotiate a ceasefire in Kosovo. And I subsequently, 5 years after that, went and talked to the Kosovo Liberation Army person that I negotiated with, and I asked him, did it make a difference that I was a woman? And he said, Lynn, we would have never negotiated with a man. It would have been an ego problem and wouldn't have worked. So yes, it did make a difference. So it's very important. The other point I want to make is that the UN is making a lot of advances in what they're doing in peacekeeping with women. And I have the privilege of being part of a group of experts that they've brought in, and they've allowed us to say what we really need to do about changing the system. Right now, you have to be able to drive a manual transmission. And there's many women that can't do that. So now they're having tutorial schooling before you go on a mission so that you don't fail. They're also teaching women how to shoot guns. And so, and that is a problem too with them qualifying. So there's some concrete steps that they're making. And one of the things that they're doing in the strategy is making awareness to policymakers about how important women are in peacekeeping. And they also are, they have created an International Association of Female Police Peacekeepers. And women are very social, and they need a group to have. And this association has been kicked off, and it's very exciting. The other thing that this UN group that has done for me personally is I've got to go to the International Association of Women Police, and they parade. That association parades down the street by country, and they used to parade peacekeeping. And guess who that was? Me. Okay? And this group has been able to put together funding so that the first year they brought in 50 women who got to walk with me. What a privilege that was. And so we are making some progress. I need to wrap up, and the point that I want to make that's very, very important to me is, should Americans be involved in peacekeeping? Should America be involved in peacekeeping? My final point is, I don't know if any of you know who Adafi Yahara is. She is a woman who was trained in the 3rd class of the police in Kosovo. And I have had a lot of interfacing with her. The Americans had her go through the FBI Academy, and she's had a lot of exposure to American law enforcement. On April 7th, 2011, she was appointed the president of Kosovo. So, Americans, you have an opportunity to be involved in influencing leaders of countries. What a privilege and what a responsibility, and that we need to continue to do it. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to say I'm really glad to see so many young people here, but I want to warn you about something that Lynn said. Once you get to the field and you really start operating and doing these things, it's going to be awfully hard to go back to any kind of mundane work. So I do have to warn you about that. The other thing I'd like to recognize my mentor in peacekeeping and my very dear friend Jacques-Paul Klein, who has been the SRSG 3 times, I believe. And sometime, if you ever get an opportunity to see the briefing that he gives on how he set up the Liberian mission, I think you'll understand a lot more about how you make this sausage and how you try to make it work. Okay, just I'm going to do just a very few PowerPoint things, but each of these has kind of a message. In the upper left hand, you see a Sikh who's a peacekeeper. There are certain countries that always provide peacekeepers. You get Indians, you get Pakistanis, you get Bangladeshis, you get Ghanaians. Nothing wrong with that, they're fine people. But there are other countries that don't do things. Anybody know who the little leprechaun down in the lower corner is? And this goes to a point that Jacques has made to me several times. That's Jerry McMahon. Jerry was the Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces. He has served 21 times in peacekeeping missions. He's now retired in Cape Town, South Africa, because he had really learned to love Africa. His first mission, he was an infantry platoon leader that recovered the remains of Dag Hammarskjöld. But this, I have to say, and Jacques will back me up on this, Jacques likes to say that Europeans don't like to wear short pants anymore. They don't like to go to these nasty, hot places, and so consequently you're getting fewer and fewer donations of people to come. So you are starting to have to rely on other countries. Do the Americans participate with Blue Berets? I think as of August, we're like number 58 in the rank order in the UN of actually providing people that wear Blue Berets. Years ago when I was, after we pulled out of Macedonia for political reasons, we were thrown out actually, when I was at the UN Association, there was a lot of rancor here in the United States about, we're not going to have, we've got too many Americans actually wearing these Blue Berets. Well, at one moment during that debate, there was actually one American wearing a Blue Beret. So, there's a lot of falsehoods that go into this. Again, going back to the short pants thing, down in the right, and I assume that's probably Haiti, that's a Canadian soldier. Canadians played a very good role in Haiti, but part of that was because of the hemisphere and a large Haitian population in Canada. The last one here, anybody recognize the flag on that soldier's sleeve?
Is it Ugandan?
That's Ugandan. Because I want to make the point, peacekeeping and peace enforcement, my first slide said peacekeeping / peace enforcement, is not just UN. More and more we're starting to rely on regional security organizations. And as a matter of fact, I just received a call, I have a voicemail here I haven't heard yet, from Muhammad Ali Hassan, a Somali who hopefully 4 or 5 years from now may be the Somali president. He's talking with me all the time and meeting with Ugandans all the time on what's called AMISOM. That's an African Union peacekeeping, and actually I shouldn't say peacekeeping, peace enforcement mission in Somalia. Because if you ever say peacekeeping to the Ugandan Chief of Staff, General Rwanda, he will throw you out of his office. Because that's a war. These guys are out there fighting Al-Shabaab. And this is part of the problem. A lot of times when something's called peacekeeping, there is no peace to keep. Now why do it? Why should Americans be involved in it? Okay, I've got that first one up there. It's the right thing to do. The problem is that argument carries almost no weight with policymakers. I know when I was brought back from Bosnia the first year of the war and met with the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich at the time, he actually gave me an hour and a half. We were supposed to meet for half an hour, and at the end of it he was going to meet President-elect Clinton. And he said, okay, if you were me, what would you tell the guy who's about to be the most powerful man in the world? And I said, well, frankly, I'd only tell him one thing. For a change, why don't we do what's right instead of what's expedient? And the cynicism in this town is so great, and it's not that Speaker Gingrich was being cynical, but he said, I hear you, but if I said that to any audience in this town, liberal or conservative, Democratic or Republican, they would laugh me out of the room. So anyway, it's the right thing to do, but doesn't carry much weight. Quarantine conflicts. You don't want these conflicts to spread, so it is good to get a force in there to kind of put the lid on things. That's good and bad. You quarantine it so it doesn't spread, but at the same time, you let the people go on slaughtering each other within the place. So a lot of that has to do with the mandate. Cost effective. And I think this is one of the biggest arguments. You know, we military guys, we cost a lot of money. We really do. It's incredible the amounts of money that we've spent in Afghanistan, that we've spent in Iraq. We spend really a tiny amount to have the Ugandans, the Burundians, now the Djiboutians and the Sierra Leoneans and Kenyans carry our water. They've been carrying our water for the last 4 years in Somalia. It's really a drop in the bucket compared to putting our own forces in and actually fighting a war. Last of all, and it's mentioned in the report, it's been mentioned in the UN Charter, what you're really doing is this decision to use force, or the possible use of force, you're kind of depoliticizing, or you're collectivizing that decision, as opposed to just an individual country and, you know, invading countries all the time, which we Americans are very, very wont to do. Now, what the U.S. can and should do, and these are just my own thoughts. I used to be the vice president of the UN Association and fought all these battles on trying to get, you know, our arrears paid and everything. Number one, I think really, one thing that we really can do and we do very effectively is training. I've listed a few things here. Is Tim Rainey here? I thought he might be here. Tim Rainey is a retired Army colonel who runs the ACOTA program for the State Department. And you know, most of this training is paid for through State Department funds. DOD is kind of restricted from some of this. But this is to train African peacekeepers. And the ACOTA training has really done wonders for the Ugandans, the Burundians, and now will for the others. PAE that Lynn works for has had a piece of that contract. MPRI, which is now in Agility, has had some of that contract. And what they're really doing is going out and teaching these guys how really, really to be real soldiers. And watching the Ugandans over the last 4 years, not only in how professional that they've become just in appearance, but how they're fighting that war differently in Somalia is really pretty inspiring. I've got here PKO North and South. These are the kind of things that very few of the American public or anybody in the world even know that's going on. PKO North and South, it's a series of exercises that have been going on for about a decade now in Latin America. It comes under the auspices of the U.S. Southern Command and U.S. Army South. About 4 years ago, I had to role play the UNSRSG in Managua. I had not been back. I fought for 5 years in Central America. I had not been back to Central America for almost 20 years. I've been doing my Balkans thing and some African things. And so the first day I got up in front of 300 Latin American and Caribbean officers. And they had to listen to my brutal Spanish. But I said to them, you know, the last time I was here, you Nicaraguans wouldn't have spoken to those Salvadorans, and neither one of you would have had anything to do with those Hondurans. And now look at this. These exercises have created these ties among people. And the thing that's really good for UN peacekeeping is in South America, oh boy, I can run out of time quickly. In South America, there's a standing peacekeeping brigade now of Argentinians and Chileans. Their diplomats can hardly talk to each other. But these guys have been exercising repeatedly and they've gotten to know each other. In Central America, which is my old stomping grounds, there's a standing peacekeeping battalion. You know, they don't have as much money as the South Americans. But that's Guatemalans, Salvadorans, Nicaraguans, and Hondurans. A standing battalion that can be called upon by the UN. And the U.S. has had a lot to do with training and helping to equip that. I think the U.S. can provide logistics support. And General Powell, when he was chairman of Joint Chiefs, always said, well, we'll provide what others can't provide. A lot of that is what I call strategic lift, you know, getting the peacekeepers places. Intelligence. Intelligence is an important thing which we weren't even allowed to talk about before the 2000 Brahimi report. Intelligence is important to any military force, and the U.S. can provide that. We provided that actually at the end of the war in El Salvador to help the people that were negotiating the peace treaty. We need to pay our assessment, and that's becoming harder all the time, but that's very important. Finally, I think special troops. You know, we're not going to put a lot of combat troops in anywhere, and maybe they shouldn't, but specialties that we have that others don't have, going back to General Powell, maybe in intelligence or communications, those are the kind of things we can provide. What we're not going to do, you know, I believe, and I still deal in military circles all the time, I don't believe we're ever going to provide significant combat troops to a UN peacekeeping mission. Generally, we're not going to put U.S. troops under the command of foreign commanders. And there is a feeling among our guys who have been fighting very hard for the last decade that trying to switch from being fighters to being peacekeepers will kind of dull the edge. So I don't think you're going to get much support in the Pentagon for that, no matter what anyone says. You're not going to increase peacekeeping funding. We're going to have to fight to keep what we do now. And I don't think we can be, and I'm not going at all against anything Lynn said, I don't think we can be an effective provider of actual police units. Because we don't have a national police, we don't have a gendarmerie. But the kind of things Lynn's been doing and the kind of things she's talking about is exactly what we can do. We can provide higher level advisors, we can provide very good training to start to explain to these guys that, you know, you're not just out there to make a buck and rob everybody, but there are principles of democratic policing, and you are actually a servant of the people. So I think that is the kind of thing that we can do. Lynn, I'm glad to hear that you're going to be involved in doing a lot of this recruiting now, because she and I talked about this. I'll tell you, many of the first contingents of U.S. police that were recruited to go to places like the Balkans, many of them were horrific. And I think Jacques probably has some stories about that. Okay, is my time up? No, I still have time. Oh, wow. What can I say now? I'm trying to run through this. There are other things on policing. For example, the FBI has an academy in Budapest. I don't know if you know about that. They do it for other purposes. But, you know, for about, ever since the wall came down, they've had an entire military garrison in Budapest, and they train mid-level police officers from all over the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Now, of course, they do it a lot so that they have ties to these people that they want to cooperate with. But I've lectured there several times, and it's a really professional thing and handles all the languages, so it really can be done. 1 minute left. I think I'll just leave it at that. Boy, I was trying to run through that as quickly as I could. I hope we'll get some good questions.
Thank you, Bill.
What I've been thinking about since Bob went back to the beginning to talk about peace are two words that we throw around this town a lot, and we commingle them and we parse them, and you know, we say them independently and together, which is peace and security. And I was in Bosnia in 95, 96, post-storm and pre-date. And it was cold. I slept in a bathtub. I thought I was a genius. That you know you could get in a small room. You didn't have any heat. You didn't have any water, so you didn't need the tub for its original intent. And you know, the Europeans make these wonderful heavy goose down duvets, so if you line the tub with a couple of them, you got yourself a pillow, and you put a couple of those goose down things on top of you, you could get a little bit of warmth. A lot of heavy arms in the city, and so there weren't any windows, which was a plus, and it was quieter, and I thought in relative terms it was a pretty commodious place to be. And a lot of other Bosnians slept in the tub. And we have the 38th and final ceasefire. I read an article not long ago about the people that are successful are those that can envision success. You can't get to a point of success unless you can You can see what success might look like or feel like to you in the end game. And so Dick Holbrook Company got a 38th and final ceasefire, which, you know, most folks on the ground wouldn't have given much money was going to hold up as the 37 fire or not. But what that whole experience did for me was peace is not a sentiment to me that is on a greeting card, that's on a holiday card. It is a palpable thing to me. And the security element is the same thing. That most of the places that these peacekeepers go into, people have lived through some horrible, horrible, horrific things. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is just how hard it is. I don't care if you're UN peacekeeping, if you're Americans, if you're a NATO force, when the rubber meets the road, it is just damn difficult to secure a civilian population. It's the hardest thing that anybody tries to do because there are more of them and too few of you. And it's just, it is the hardest work, but it is the most important work out there to get to peace and security. What is it that the Americans, in my mind, and I think Bill's right, you know, let's not talk about what somebody could do, let's talk about what they would do and what could help. I'm a great believer in some command and control. I served in UNTAS with Chuck Klein. He will get higher up on the food chain than I was. And he wanted the Del Topchi oil fields back from the extremely armed bunch of folks that were squatting on it. And what I've always been impressed with was what Jacques did, in my humble opinion, was to use those things that he had, not what you might wish you had. What he had was the Jordanians, and he had his bottom and the shooters and the infantry, and he had the Belgians on top of that, and then more importantly, he had Jacques on top, who knows a few things about command and control and exercises yourself, and he went out there and he got him back. And so the things that the U.S. has in abundance, if they would be willing to donate more of these things, in my humble opinion, would make a great deal of difference. What the President talked about, civilian police, civilian personnel. You're not going to meet a guy in a bar somewhere who rants and raves about UN peacekeeping if there's anybody else around who's an American who served in a peacekeeping operation or butted up against one. They're going to come back and they're going to feel like people do about the U.S. Army, about the corporation that they work for. Is it perfect? You know, do they moan about it? Absolutely, because that's what we all do. But once you have some skin in the game, and once you have seen up close and personal what people do out there, and sometimes how little they have to do it with, and what they are willing to do. And I think one of the differences, it's not a right way to do peacekeeping, peace building, whatever, between how the Americans do it, the UN does it, NATO does it. It's just different. In the handover to the NATO forces in Bosnia, I was eating on Tuzla, Maine. And there was a U.S. soldier in Battle Rattle Regalia, and there was a Swedish colonel who had served with the UN forces And the American was going to go back because he was under, you know, a separate security system and read a quarter of a paperback very slowly to keep himself amused. They asked the colonel what he was going to do, and he said, well, see, I've been here for 4 years. He says, I'm going to go into town, eat supper, and have a beer at the local pub. And he said, but first I'm going to choir practice because I sing in the local choir. And the UN people, sometimes at our peril, live extremely close to the ground. But when you sing in the local choir, and you get your hair done in the local salons, and you have landlords with every opinion in the world, you can't help but understand more about what goes on the ground because that's where you live, and you couldn't stop people from telling you about it even if you wanted to. I think that the U.S. does have things that are what I call the high ticket, high dollar things that would help. 3 helicopters in Darfur would have made a lot of difference. The transport to get there. And I think the UN has met them halfway. I think they've cut back on their transport cost by looking that they've got peacekeeping missions in regional areas and having a more regional, you know, approach to all of this. I think that supporting this global field support strategy, the hardest, we are never going to have a standing army of people at Fort Drum sitting on G, waiting on O, you know, with equipment and all of these kinds of stuff. But neither do we need to be passing a tin cup around every time we need to go someplace. And somehow there's got to be a middle ground of putting enough support in place and enough quick support in place to get, you know, people to where they need to go. And the other thing that I think that the UN is good value is we are in places that you couldn't get a mission there now if your soul depended on it. Middle East UNSO. I heard the force commander say one time, say what you will about UNSO, but you couldn't get this mission put here today if your life depended on it. India, Pakistan. On that border in Kashmir, nobody's a good enough negotiator to interject a mission on that border now. UNDOF in Syria. UNIFIL in Lebanon. Lebanon becomes a bigger player, you know, because it's on the road to and from lots of places where our strategic interests are these days. Haiti. Sudan, all 3 of the missions there. The U.S., for a 20-year civil war with Operation Lifeline Sudan. Some of us in this, they're old enough to remember that. We spent $1 million a day on Operation Lifeline Sudan. With a horrible, horrible destructive civil war. What I say about South Sudan now, well, all 3 of them, the North, the South, and I mean, it ain't great, but compared to what we did have, it's a miracle. And so, I think the Americans do need to be involved. I think it teaches them about parts of the world that they wouldn't go to otherwise. And I agree with Bill, we're not going to use combat troops, but I think that encouraging people and material, staff officers, the helicopters, the heavy lift, some of these things would make a tremendous amount of